We're looking out across Sussex and Surrey, one of the most wooded parts of the southeast of England. Here you can see broadleaf woodlands, probably unchanged pretty well for 500, 600 years. Basically created by the management of the woods, by traditional practices, coppicing, the utilisation of that woodland for fuel, for charcoal, firing up the whole industry of this area and beyond. To improve the woodlands, to improve the biodiversity, the wildlife habitat, and also stimulate young trees coming through, keep them healthy and productive. We need to actually work them, we need to take timber out, and in doing that there's a whole opportunity for the whole craftwork industry and exciting employment for young people who want that type of lifestyle.
I'm Barney and I did an apprenticeship here about 3 or 4 years ago, and I've just come back to help out and do things when Ben needs or work on some of the buildings that are going on. This is for whoever comes to work next in the woods, which I think they're starting in about 2 weeks or something, so yeah, that's going to be their home for the next year or so.
I'm Dave. I've apprenticed with Ben a couple of years ago. My background for the previous sort of 7 years was in microelectronics. So sat in an office and hating every minute of it really, dreaming of being outside.
My family thought I was a bit mad moving out of a perfectly good house to come and live in the woods. But it's amazing, yeah, I'd recommend it to anyone. It was one of the best years I've ever spent, definitely. Harsh, but great fun, really good.
It's cold often, often wet and muddy, and cooking by fire every night can be challenging, but it's the rewards are vast and it's well worth it in my opinion.
Owls every night and things going around. Mice often, there was quite a mice problem in my caravan, but you get used to it and I don't mind it at all really. Yeah, washing outside is a bit more of an issue in the middle of January, but you find ways around it.
I just feel a real sort of inner peace every day I wake up, and I'm looking forward to what I do, and just the mass sense of satisfaction you get from building something like this. You know, it's just, we've made this out of the woodland, and it's just phenomenal, the sense of achievement.
Never actually realised you could make a living like this in this country, in forestry, and so this was a bit of a revelation for me. And if anyone's interested in learning about forestry in England and how you can make a living out of it, then this is definitely one of the places to come, I'd say.
The year I spent with Ben was just phenomenal. I've learnt so much, probably more than I did in my entire time in school. So.
We usually hook up at least once during the winter to see how each other are getting on, or he'll come over and help me shoot some squirrels or something.
I think a lot of young people are looking for a lifestyle that's more fulfilling. They're looking for something that is long-term, stable, sustainable. I think a lot of young people are possibly put off by the idea that they might work and find that they're in a contract the last 6 months or a year. I mean, my contract with the woods is at least my life, and the woods goes on after that. So it's a very different way of working and living. So I think that appeals to a lot of people. So I think that is one of the interests that draws people into wanting to be working in the woods. Yep. After the Second World War, people left the woods in droves to work in construction, rebuilding cities and houses for people, and the woods kind of got partly forgotten. And a lot of the traditional woodsmen were gone from the woods, and there was kind of a gap of a generation. And it's only really been in the last sort of 25 years that people have started to rework, find some of the traditional crafts and begin to work the woods again in a more traditional manner.
So that's rhododendron, not to be confused with this, which is chestnut.
My name's Max. I've been apprentice here since last November. I came here thinking, oh, the buildings were, kind of mainly what it was all about. And as Ben will very quickly point out, that's not what it's all about. It's about just sort of knowing about the environment, you know, and sort of being able to manage it in a sensitive way. Just the sort of the enjoyment of working with hand tools and all the rest of it, and sort of just being in this amazing environment. And then you get a text message and it sort of like shatters it all. But
1, 2, tap. 1, 2, tap. 1, 2, tap. So that edge shoulders into the piece of timber. So all the force on this is then locked into this pole. My life at Prickly Nut Wood as a woodsman changes dramatically from season to season. I start my year in the winter because that's when we cut the coppice and we source the material for which we make everything else throughout the year. So the winter time is hard. We're working, cutting the timber, keeping warm, processing. It's the real raw end of woodland management. And as we burst into spring, we start to take that material and convert it to some of the things that people are going to use in their gardens, in fences, building materials, and we start to process it more. Along with that, the woodland itself is changing dramatically. Spring is coming, the wood's coming to life, the wildlife's appearing, and we work that into the way we live and work here in the woods. As summer comes, we're on to the bigger projects, usually moving slightly out of the woodland and taking our materials to make maybe a house or a building for someone. So now you see what I mean about how it suddenly feels a bit bigger than it did when it was on the bed.
Yeah.
Prickly Nut Wood is a coppice woodland. Sweet chestnut coppice arrived here with the Romans, mainly for the nut production, but also for the timber. And nowadays we use it mainly for the timber. And as a coppice tree, it produces a really durable pole that we can make into fencing, building products, and this forms the basis of my livelihood and my work as a woodsman. Sweet chestnut coppice, like Prickly Nut Wood, there are about 17,000 hectares of these across the southeast of England. They were intensively managed once. So much production of, for different uses, for craft work, for fuel, for the hop industry, for growing hops up, relied upon this durable, fast-growing chestnut. And now we have acres of it, and so much of it isn't being managed. And yet this system produces us with a continual yield of timber that we can use for making things. In fact, there is no other system I know where the human endeavour of actually cutting down the trees actually increases the biodiversity of the woodland. There are species here in this wood that rely on me cutting down this timber. If I don't cut it, they'll die out. I have nightjars that come in and nest here. They can't nest here unless I actually cut the coppice, open up the area to allow the light in. So it's one of these really rare situations where humans are needed in the whole biodiversity cycle. Looking across, we're seeing sweet chestnut coppice here I cut last winter. So this is just in less than a year, it's grown up to this height. Down at the base of this, we have what we call the stool. And this stool is about 150 years old. And this has been cut a number of times to send out new growth and new shoots. You can see where I cut it last time, and this is the new growth coming up from here. So these will carry on growing, and over time the more dominant ones will thin out from the others and shade out the others. And so you'll end up with, as the years go by, less and less stems as they get thicker. So there's about maybe 50 on here now. Give it about 10 years, there'll probably be 15 of them. In 30 years' time, we might be down to just 2 or 3 stems. If I left it even longer, eventually it would thin out to a single stem, and then it would convert back to high forest. Probably not very helpful actually, cat, at the moment. Go on, hop it. I'm looking now at some coppice I cut 5 years ago. So immediately we're up sort of 15 to 20 foot high, poles starting to grow and thicken out as they work up towards the light. These will grow on, maybe I'll grow them on into fence posts, maybe I'll grow them on into houses. It all depends on when I next decide to cut the coppice and keep that cycle going. We tend to retreat back into the woodland from the bigger main projects of summer come to an end, and already there's what I call the quickening within me. I'm starting to think about the winter coming and what I need to do in preparation, because you've got to be prepared for winter or you won't get through it. Start with the cutting of the timber, new apprentices, and we start a new year. Now, I've been doing this for 20 years, but there's been woodsmen here before me doing this for the last few hundred years, and I aim to leave this so that woodsmen in the future can continue with it. Upright posts, and you've got that long wall plate beam, those have got mortise and tenons. Yeah, because with mortise and tenon, the weight of the beam is coming down onto the shoulder of the upright post.
He's a very good teacher because he will take the time to explain things clearly. He'll show you how to do something and then just expects you to go out and get on with it. It's a steep learning curve basically, but it's good because it forces you to sort of just think and get on with it. You can pick up the vibe from them that it's quite a daunting prospect, and in a lot of ways it is. Don't get hung up about living outside over winter is going to be tough. Yes, it might be, but you'll be fine.
Right.
You're with somebody right from the moment you get up, pretty much up to the point where you go to bed and all the rest of it, and you go through the process together. So it's hard for both of you, and if the last thing you want is the other person making it harder.
I didn't get one clear candidate coming through. I've just been through them again and again, thinking about what I can offer them and how well it's going to work for them here. The key thing really to ensure it doesn't go wrong is that the two people get on and support one another. If you get a situation where they're not getting on, then they're working together during the day, probably ignoring each other while they get on with their work in the woods. And then come the evening, they disappear off to their caravan, shut the door and get on with their own thing. If that happens, it's a very long winter, and it's not good for them and it's not good for me. There's always an unknown element there that I can't really do anything about other than just make that judgment I do on 4 days. But I've opted for Mikey and Claire. Both of them have accepted to come, so that's great. I think with Claire it's very clear what she's looking for. I think she knows very much where she wants to get to through her experience here, and I'm pretty confident I can facilitate that and she can move on from here. With Mikey it's a little more tricky because he's coming from quite a different background, dispatching ice around the countryside or around the city more. So I think it's going to be more challenging for him coming from that urban to rural life, in particular the social side, the evenings, the quiet, the lack of entertainment. I think may take him a little while to adapt, and I hope that having the sort of probably more steady influence of Claire, who's more used to that, will be helpful to him in getting through that. I think he's incredibly enthusiastic, and I think if I can channel that enthusiasm in the right direction, we can turn the Iceman into a woodsman.
No, it's so true, isn't it, man? It's such a nice lifestyle, you know what I mean?